You did everything they said would lead to happiness. You followed the rules. You worked hard. You built a life with structure, goals, and good intentions. You showed up. You stayed strong. You learned to say, "I'm fine," even when you weren't. You tried to be grateful. You tried to stay positive. You tried to keep going. But one night, when the house was quiet, the inbox was empty, and there was no one left to perform for, you heard it. That quiet question you couldn't ignore anymore. Why don't I feel happy? It didn't come from crisis. It came from stillness, from the space between all the things you've built and the silence that still lingers underneath them. You had done everything right. So why didn't it feel right? Here's the truth no one told you. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're just chasing the wrong thing, because happiness isn't missing from your life. What's missing is meaning. The modern world made a promise it couldn't keep. Do all the right things, and happiness will follow. But Viktor Frankl saw through that illusion. He lived through suffering that stripped away every comfort, every distraction, every illusion of control. He didn't write theories from a cozy office. He wrote from the edge of death, from the depths of a Nazi concentration camp, where the idea of positive thinking was meaningless. And still, Frankl discovered something timeless, something no system, no regime, no amount of suffering could take from him. He discovered that the deepest human drive isn't pleasure, it isn't comfort, it isn't happiness, it's purpose. And when you lose touch with that purpose, no amount of productivity, positivity, or praise will make you feel whole. You might keep going, you might smile through the meetings, you might stay busy enough to avoid the ache, but at some point you'll feel it, that internal gap between the life you're living and the life that actually means something to you. That ache, it's not weakness, it's not failure, it's the sign that part of you is still alive, still searching, still refusing to settle for comfort over meaning, because you were not made to chase happiness like a product. You were made to live for something greater than yourself. Frankl said it simply, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. It's not a destination, it's a side effect of living with depth. It appears when your life aligns with something that matters. It follows when you stop trying to feel good and start trying to be real. But the world doesn't teach you that. It teaches you to chase dopamine, to avoid discomfort, to distract yourself when the questions get too loud. It tells you to fix your mindset, upgrade your habits, track your moods, buy more, achieve more, smile more. And when all that fails, it quietly suggests that maybe you're just not enough. But the truth is, you don't need to feel good all the time. You need to feel honest with yourself. You need to live a life that feels like it's yours, not one that looks impressive from the outside, but feels hollow inside. This isn't about abandoning happiness. It's about redefining it, seeing it not as the goal, but as the result of living truthfully. So if you've been doing all the right things and still feel like something's missing, don't run from that feeling. Look into it, because what you're missing might not be joy or motivation or clarity. It might be a reason to keep going when all those things are gone. And that reason is what Frankl calls meaning, the kind that can't be bought, the kind that can't be faked, the kind that stays even when the lights go out and the crowd goes quiet. So stay with me, because in the next part of this journey, we'll explore what meaning really is, and how chasing happiness too hard might be the very thing keeping it from showing up. So what did Viktor Frankl understand? That billions of dollars in happiness research, coaching, and self-help still fail to grasp. He understood this. Happiness is not something you chase. It's something that happens when you stop chasing. Because the more you obsess over feeling good, the more you become disconnected from what actually matters. You start confusing comfort for purpose, validation for truth. You start living on the surface of your own life. Frankl didn't come to this realization in comfort. He came to it surrounded by death, in a Nazi concentration camp where he lost his wife, his family, his freedom, everything. Everything except one thing: his ability to choose his response, his ability to live for something no one could take from him. He watched as people who had nothing still found the strength to comfort others, still held on to their dignity, still chose meaning over despair. Why? Because they had a reason to endure the unendurable, a reason that made the pain worth facing. Frankl quotes Nietzsche, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." And that's not just a poetic idea, it's a survival strategy. It's a blueprint for inner freedom, even in outer captivity. Now compare that to what modern life teaches you. You're told to seek comfort, to avoid pain, to chase pleasure and call it happiness. You're told the goal is to feel better, not to live deeper, but feelings come and go. Pleasure fades, comfort becomes empty. And when you're left alone with yourself, the question that remains is this: what am I living for? Frankl believed that the core of our suffering is not that life is hard, but that we no longer believe it means anything. And when you remove meaning, suffering becomes unbearable. Because pain without purpose feels like punishment. But pain with purpose can become fuel. It can become transformation. It can become the path to something higher. This is why chasing happiness backfires. Because happiness cannot hold you together when life falls apart. Meaning can. Happiness cannot explain your suffering. Meaning can. Happiness is not what gets you through your darkest hour. Meaning is. But meaning isn't found in slogans. It isn't found in a product. It's found in living truthfully, with responsibility, sacrifice, and connection. And when you live that way, something strange happens. You stop asking if you're happy, because you're too engaged in something that matters. You start to feel grounded, not because everything is easy, but because something inside you has finally said yes to life as it is. Not life as it's marketed, not life as it's idealized, but life as it is, messy, uncertain, painful, beautiful. That kind of life doesn't give you constant pleasure, but it gives you something better. It gives you peace, it gives you presence, it gives you dignity. Frankl never promised happiness. He promised meaning. And when meaning takes root, happiness grows where you least expect it. Not as a goal, but as a quiet reward, a side effect, a visitor, not a possession. So if happiness keeps slipping through your fingers, stop grabbing for it. Start reaching for meaning instead. Because happiness is not the treasure. It's not the finish line. It's not something you unlock when you finally fix yourself. It's what follows you when you start walking towards something worth enduring for. When you give your life to a cause, a person, a principle, that deserves your full attention. And it's in those moments when your actions are aligned with your truth that happiness quietly arrives. Not because you chased it, but because you lived in a way that gave it room to appear. But what happens when meaning disappears from the culture? When a society gives you every tool to live, but no reason why you should? That's the world we've built. Endless options, instant access, every pleasure available every second of the day. Yet somehow, we've never felt more lost, more anxious, more unsure of what we're even doing here. Frankl called this the existential vacuum, a condition where people are not tormented by lack of comfort, but by lack of purpose. Because when you no longer know why you live, you will try to numb the fact that you don't. You'll reach for dopamine, for stimulation, for distractions dressed as motivation, anything to avoid the quiet questions. You'll chase entertainment, stay busy, call burnout ambition, call scrolling rest, call chaos a lifestyle. And underneath it all, there's that same silent ache, a longing for direction, a hunger for something real, a grief you can't name. A grief you can't name because you were never allowed to feel it, never allowed to pause and just listen. We've built a culture that teaches us how to function, but not how to be, how to perform, but not how to endure, how to achieve, but not how to exist with dignity when life doesn't go as planned. So we compensate, we curate perfect images, we obsess over productivity, we overschedule ourselves to feel less empty. But it never sticks, because meaning can't be manufactured by effort alone, and it definitely can't be outsourced. When we stop asking the deeper questions, we don't eliminate our need for answers. We just bury them under noise. We convince ourselves we're fine. We slap gratitude on top of confusion. We force a smile over the weight of not knowing why we do what we do. And the more we deny our emptiness, the louder it echoes when the distractions fade. Frankl warned us, people don't just need to avoid suffering, they need a reason to suffer for. Because suffering is not the enemy. Meaninglessness is. Pain with purpose can transform. Pain without purpose only corrodes. But our culture doesn't give you that lens. It sells you happiness. It teaches you to chase feelings, not foundations. And when you inevitably feel unfulfilled, it gaslights you, tells you to try harder, to stay positive, to be more grateful for your confusion. We have more freedom than ever, but fewer reasons to use it well. More choices than ever, but less clarity on what matters. That's the paradox of the modern soul. You're overfed on stimulus, but starving for meaning. You're told you can be anything, but no one helps you ask what's worth being. You're taught to build your identity, but not your integrity. To master algorithms, but not silence. To scale your skills, but not your soul. And that's the root of the modern vacuum. Not a lack of pleasure, but a silence where purpose should be. Not a lack of stimulation, but a numbness where conviction once lived. We escape into hyperactivity, not because we're ambitious, but because we're afraid of stillness. Stillness forces the truth to surface, that we've forgotten how to live inwardly. We've lost the thread that ties our pain to a purpose, and without it, we drift. But here's the good news. That drift isn't final. That ache isn't fatal. It's an invitation to stop performing, to start returning. Returning to what Frankl tried to show us, that your life doesn't need to feel good to be meaningful. It needs to mean something even when it hurts. Because when you find your why, you can survive almost any how. And that's not just a theory, that's a way back to yourself. A way back to something deeper than feelings, deeper than motivation. A life that holds together even when nothing else does. So what happens when you stop running from the emptiness? When instead of chasing good feelings, you start asking better questions. Not, am I happy? But, am I becoming the person I know I could be? Not, how do I feel today? But what do I stand for when it's hard to feel anything at all? Because here's the paradox Frankl understood. The more you obsess over happiness, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you give yourself to something greater than your own pleasure, something strange begins to happen. You stop constantly checking your emotional mirror. You stop asking if today's good enough, if you're grateful enough, if your life feels right every single moment. Instead, you shift into something deeper, into presence, into purpose, into alignment. Frankl once wrote, "Happiness is the byproduct of being responsible for something greater than yourself." Not responsible in the sense of duty or guilt, but in the sense of stepping into your highest possibility. Taking ownership of your existence, choosing to live not just for yourself, but for something that gives your life weight and direction. That kind of responsibility doesn't feel like a burden, it feels like meaning, it feels like home. Because when you live for something that matters, a cause, a principle, a loved one, even a future version of yourself, you stop measuring your worth by how good you feel. You start measuring it by how true you are. You stop chasing balance and start carrying weight. Weight that grounds you, weight that wakes you up. And that weight, that's what gives your suffering dignity. That's what gives your actions integrity. Without it, life becomes floaty, rootless, a chase with no finish line. But with it, everything changes. Even pain takes on a new shape. Even effort becomes sacred, because you're no longer asking the world to entertain you. You're asking yourself to rise. And when you live like that, happiness doesn't need to be forced. It visits quietly. It arrives as calm, as clarity, as the knowing that you're in the right place, doing the work that only you can do. The work that's waiting for you. The person you were always meant to grow into. That's what Frankl meant when he said, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." So stop asking, "Am I happy today?" Start asking, "What's the next right step toward who I'm becoming?" Because sometimes the path will hurt. Sometimes it will feel slow, uncertain, heavy. But when you know why you walk, even the hard days feel holy. Even the silence feels full. Even the suffering feels clean. Because it's no longer meaningless. It's part of the story, part of the becoming. That's the shift no one talks about. Not from sadness to joy, but from aimlessness to alignment. Not from pain to pleasure, but from floating to standing firm. So if you're tired of asking, "Why don't I feel happy yet?" try a different question. What responsibility have I been avoiding? Not the responsibility society demands, but the one your soul has been quietly whispering. The responsibility to become someone real, someone honest, someone who lives with intention, not reaction. Because that person doesn't chase happiness, they embody it, without needing to name it, without needing to explain it. They simply live in a way that makes happiness feel like a natural response, not a reward. So if you're still searching, pause, not to find more answers, but to return to the deeper question. What is calling you to rise? And what part of you already knows how to answer? So what does it actually look like to stop chasing happiness and start living with meaning? Frankl didn't just offer theory, he offered direction, a way back to yourself even when the world feels hollow. He believed that meaning can always be found, no matter what you've lost, no matter what you're going through, no matter where you are in life. And according to Frankl, there are 3 distinct paths that can reconnect you to what matters most. None of them require a perfect life. All of them require honest engagement. The first path is this: creative action, to build, to contribute, to shape something that didn't exist before you touched it. This could be your work, your writing, your parenting, your business, your presence in someone else's life. It's not about productivity for applause. It's about creation with care. You feel alive when you give something to the world that reflects your truth, not just your skills, but your soul. And in that giving, you realize that your life is not just to be consumed. It's meant to be expressed, poured into something that stays after you're gone. You don't need to be an artist to create. You just need to care about what you leave behind, even if it's invisible to the world, but deeply felt by someone who needed it. The second path is this: deep experience, the ability to connect with people, with nature, with beauty, with truth. To stand in front of a mountain or beside someone you love and let the moment expand beyond words. To be so present that time slows down and you feel yourself belong to something larger than your own thoughts. Frankl believed that love, not romantic fantasy, but real, steady love, is one of the most powerful sources of meaning on earth. Because in loving fully, you step outside yourself. You make room for something sacred, and you begin to see the world as something worth being alive for. Even 5 minutes of presence can heal 5 years of drifting. Because in that stillness, you remember what it feels like to be fully here. The third path is this: conscious suffering, to face pain without letting it define you, to endure hardship without losing your dignity. This is the hardest path, but often the most powerful, because when suffering is unavoidable, you still have a choice: to let it crush you or to give it meaning. And when you give it meaning, it changes. Frankl wrote, "Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Pain becomes part of your evolution. Loss becomes part of your depth. Struggle becomes part of your strength. This path doesn't glorify pain. It transforms it. Not by pretending it's beautiful, but by refusing to let it be wasted. You don't need to enjoy the pain. You only need to refuse to let it be meaningless. And sometimes that alone is enough to begin reclaiming your life. Meaning doesn't always feel good at first, but it feels honest. And in a world obsessed with comfort, honesty might be the rarest form of strength. 3 paths, 3 invitations. You don't have to walk all 3 at once. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to step toward meaning instead of away from discomfort. Maybe for you, it starts by returning to your craft, the thing that made you feel most like yourself before the world asked you to be someone else. Maybe it starts by sitting in silence with someone you care about and saying what you've always meant to say. Maybe it starts by honoring your pain, not by fixing it, but by giving it the dignity of being part of your human experience. Whatever it is, you don't need to wait until you feel better to begin living meaningfully. You only need to decide that your life matters enough to be lived with intention. Because when you take even one step toward meaning, happiness stops being something you chase and starts becoming something that walks quietly beside you. It will not arrive with fireworks. It will not come with a medal. But one day, in the middle of an ordinary moment, you will feel a quiet truth settle in your chest. I may not have everything I want, but I'm exactly where I need to be. By now, you've probably realized the emptiness you've felt isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that something deeper is waking up. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be reconnected, not to more pleasure, but to more purpose. Because despite what the world told you, you were never meant to feel happy all the time. You were meant to live meaningfully, even in the absence of happiness. That's the difference Frankl gave us. He didn't promise relief. He offered resilience. He didn't give us quick fixes. He gave us a path that doesn't depend on ideal circumstances, but on inner clarity. A path you can walk even when everything else feels uncertain. He reminded us of a truth that modern life tries so hard to bury. Happiness is not something you find. It's something that follows. And it follows those who are brave enough to stop performing, to stop pretending, to stop chasing what was never real to begin with. It follows those who are willing to live for something bigger than a mood, bigger than their ego, bigger than their fears. So if you're tired of feeling like you're falling behind, if you're tired of optimizing every moment and still wondering what it's all for, let that exhaustion speak. Let it tell you the truth you've been trying not to hear. You were not made for endless pleasure. You were made for depth, for becoming, for meaning. Meaning isn't flashy. It's not something you can show off. It won't go viral. It won't impress strangers. But it will steady you. It will shape you. It will carry you when every other comfort disappears. And here's what makes it even more rare. You can't buy it. You can't borrow it. You have to build it. One choice at a time. One moment of truth at a time. One decision to show up honestly, even when no one else is watching. That's the quiet revolution. Not to become someone impressive, but someone grounded. Not to escape pain, but to face it with your eyes open. Not to feel good, but to live in a way that feels real. Frankl never gave us permission to chase happiness. He gave us permission to stop needing it, to stop measuring life by how light it feels, and start measuring it by how aligned it is. And that shift is what makes you unshakable. Because when you're no longer chasing a feeling, you're free. Free to show up, free to fail, free to grow, free to be exactly where you are and still walk forward. So no, you are not broken because you feel empty. You are simply being invited to stop living on the surface. You don't need a better morning routine. You don't need another productivity hack. You don't need to fix yourself so you can finally feel good enough. You only need to ask, what am I living for? And am I willing to live for it, even on the hard days? Because when the answer is yes, you stop waiting for happiness to arrive. You become someone happiness wants to follow. And when that happens, even on the darkest days, you will not be lost. You will not be hollow. You will not be easily broken. Because you'll be living not for the next good moment, but for something that can hold you through all the moments. And maybe that is what you were looking for all along. Not the feeling, not the pleasure, not the escape, but the quiet strength of knowing. You have chosen to live with depth, and nothing, not even suffering, can take that away from you. That is where real power begins. Not in what you feel, but in what you serve. So ask yourself, not what will make me happy, but what will make my life worth enduring. Because when you answer that question honestly, you'll no longer chase happiness. You'll carry something far more valuable. You'll carry meaning, and meaning, unlike happiness, doesn't disappear when life gets hard. It deepens.